Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of Peak by Ericsson. Is it possible to get better with practice? There's a widespread belief that great athletes are genetically predisposed. An expert in the field is Professor Ericsson, who has been thinking about this for 30 years now. It's common for people to believe that natural talent equals top performance, but Peak debunks this idea and reveals that we can all improve significantly with the right kind of practice. Building quality practice is more important than building a lot of it. I know what you're thinking, hold on a second. Is there anyone who hasn't heard of Usain Bolt, Eliud Kipchoge, Simone Biles, and Michael Phelps? Yes, Michael Phelps was born with hyperextended joints, which are responsible for his powerful kick. There's no denying that heredity plays a role, especially when it comes to things like height or other measurable attributes. A 6-foot woman, for example, would be unable to compete at the highest levels of elite gymnastics. There is a lot more that goes into being a high achiever than simply having good genes. It's clear from this summary that there are no shortcuts to the top, and relying solely on good genes and natural ability will not get us there. We'll also see a huge improvement in our overall performance if we put in the time and effort. In the end, true mastery comes from committing to a method and exercising self-control in our chosen field. Prioritizing practice time is essential. Aside from simply setting aside time for practice, it's about putting in the time and being consistent. Musicians who are exceptional compared to those who are just good were studied by Ericsson's research team. Is it a matter of innate talent or practice time? At the Berlin University of Arts, they studied a group of violinists and divided them into 3 categories: good, better, and best. The amount of practice that separated these 2 groups was significant. According to one study, the best violinists had logged 3,420 hours of practice time by the time they were 18 years old. Those who were the best, on the other hand, had clocked up over 7,410 hours of practice. The quality of practice, not the quantity, was the most important factor in distinguishing the best violinists from the rest. To reach the pinnacle of their craft, violinists needed to have a clear vision, work hard, seek feedback, and make quick adjustments. Many believe that Ray Allen, an NBA All-Star, was born with a talent for the sport. Allen isn't convinced. It's hard for Allen to accept when people tell him that he was born with an incredible jump shot. Anyone on his team will tell you that he is the most dedicated three-point shooter on the team, he claims. Allen's high school basketball coach will confirm that Allen's jump shot was not significantly better than those of his teammates, rather, it was mediocre. Allen, on the other hand, honed his technique to the point where it looks so effortless that people assume he was born with it. However, quality is just as important as quantity. We can't just go through the motions of practicing something for 10,000 hours before we're considered an expert. As a rule of thumb, 10,000 hours of practice can be beneficial, but only if it's the right kind of training. Deliberate practice is a term used to describe this style of training. Are there any differences in the driving abilities of people of different ages? Your chances of having done so are slim, because the average person who has driven for 20 years is no better than someone who has only been driving for 5 years. Not all drivers are better because they've been behind the wheel longer. As soon as you've reached a certain level of proficiency, it's no longer just a matter of practicing repeatedly. It's not going to help our overall performance if we continue to practice in the same manner after we have mastered the basics of the game. As a result, if we want to avoid stagnation, we must prioritize deliberate practice. Our comfort zone is stretched when we put in the work. So, how do we get started with the practice of deliberate? Let's say your goal is to improve your tennis game. A good place to start is by establishing measurable goals for each practice. A 1-hour per day commitment isn't realistic. In place of this, the goal is to be extremely specific and goal-focused. Try to hit at least 50 balls over the net in a single session. For those who cannot accomplish this in a single day, they must practice until they do. Because deliberate practice requires intense focus, the next step is to ensure that we are undisturbed and undisturbed. Finally, it's imperative that you get plenty of it. Experts require the assistance of other experts and mentors in order to advance their careers. Find someone who can tell you what you're doing right and where you're going wrong, and use that information to your advantage. When it comes to succeeding, it's all about effort. Keep in mind, as well, that pushing ourselves past our comfort zones should be uncomfortable. In order to do this, we must step out of our comfort zone and accept the challenges that await us. Our brain structure and function can be manipulated. It was long assumed that the circuitry of brains was predetermined, and that this circuitry was responsible for a person's ability to learn and perform. Nonetheless, researchers have come to realize that the brain, even the adult brain, is far more adaptable than anyone had previously thought. We have a great deal of control over the capabilities of our brains. Taxi drivers in London are a great example of the incredible power of the human brain. Taxi drivers in London have a deep understanding of the city's roads, and they've memorized all of the shortcuts and routes. The posterior hippocampus of London taxi drivers was found to be larger in a study conducted in 2000 than that of non-taxi drivers. In the brain, the posterior hippocampus aids in spatial navigation and memory consolidation. Furthermore, the hippocampi of long-term truckers were the largest. The results of this study showed that cab drivers' brain structures and abilities were altered as a result of the time they spent learning every possible route, new landmarks, and constantly challenging themselves. Our thoughts are altered by deliberate practice. In addition to changing the shape of our brains, deliberate practice also alters our thinking processes. They excel because they have the unique ability to visualize, remember, and quickly comprehend information. The mind's ability to identify and recognize patterns relies on this ability to form effective mental representations, and it distinguishes experts from the rest of us. So, in a sense, experts have a mind's eye for what they do. Consider Alexander Alekhine, a legendary chess player. He did something remarkable in 1924. He competed against a total of 26 different chess players at the same time. He won 16, lost 5, and drew 5 of the 26 games he played. All the moves and countermoves had to be figured out in his mind without looking at the board. What you've done here is an incredible display of talent and ability. Observe what was going on in his head. He had to keep track of 26 chess boards, 832 chess pieces, and 1,664 squares in his mind. When it came to chess, Alekhine was a master at visualizing and remembering each board, and he could imagine moving each piece around in his head. He was able to process complex information and respond quickly because of his ability to form these mental representations. It is these mental representations that distinguish good people from those who are referred to as gifted. In spite of this, we can all grow and adapt our own abilities. This is why it may be time to rethink how we practice in order to change our brains and develop a better sense of perspective. Academics and business can benefit from deliberate practice. When it comes to improving our academic and professional abilities as well as our physical prowess, practice is just as important as any other aspect of our daily lives. When comparing two different methods of teaching university-level physics, the students were split into two groups of students. Lecture test learning was used by one group. Those in the other group had to participate actively in student debates and discussions in order to put their knowledge to the test. The latter group performed better on the final exam. It's common for education to focus on what people know rather than what they can do with that knowledge. Consider a virtual reality environment or a flight simulator. Developing expertise is at the heart of strategies like moot courts and role-playing for lawyers and salespeople, respectively. It's also important to quickly develop people's skills so that they don't make mistakes when it counts. You'll be able to gauge your progress because you'll be receiving feedback. You'll need a mentor in this endeavor. However, anyone will not do. Be a better person by learning from the best people in your field. In the end, it is important to remember that there are 3 ways to improve our abilities and expertise. Those 3 components are: practice with a specific goal in mind, feedback, and encouragement. Deliberate practice isn't always enjoyable, and we'll all face times when we feel uninspired. Be ruthless about routine and structure, and use group enthusiasm whenever possible, to keep yourself on track. Furthermore, staying motivated is greatly aided by keeping track of progress. Professor Ericsson's 30 years of experience studying the brains of extraordinary people have led him to the conclusion that even if we don't believe we have a genetic advantage, we can still outperform others. Moreover, when we outperform others, we also outperform our own expectations. Deliberate practice, then, is the key to becoming your best self. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.